Internet, and in today's video I'll be teaching you how you can create Leaderstats, the folder inside of Roblox Studio. Leaderstats are statistics for the leaderboard inside of Roblox, and I'll be teaching you two methods. One is easier than the other, and I will also be showing you how you can add and remove things from the Leaderstats folder as well. This is assuming that you know how to use Roblox Studio and its basics. If you don't know, I'll leave a link to the description below on how you can use Roblox Studio and the Explorer and Properties window, and how to add parts and enter experiences and all that stuff. So the first thing we want to do here is we want to head into an experience we already have, or a Baseplate template. And now that we are in the Baseplate template, the first thing you want to do is you want to head over to Workspace, and you want to scroll all the way down in the Properties menu until you see the Networking tab and enable Reject Character Deletions. This is a network thing where exploiters cannot remove their humanoid root parts and become god mode basically, or may not be able to potentially fling other players and use their accessories to their advantage to exploit your game. It's just a small, decent, free anti-cheat for your experience. So the first thing we want to do is we're going to head over to Server Script Service, and for organization's sake I'm going to add a folder, and I'm going to name this folder player, and I'm going to add a server script inside of the player folder. I'm going to name this script Leaderstats with a capital L, and I'm going to select the run context to server. You can leave this as legacy as you want. Run context is basically when this game runs, the script tells the server or the game if this is a server script or a local script. But if it's on legacy, it'll be how it's always been. Server script is server script, local script is for local script. So the first thing we want to do is we want to remove the print statement, and we want to get the player service. So we're going to do local game get service players. This is getting the player service, everything that has to do with the player service. And to add the folder, to create the folder and add the folder to the player when the player joins the experience, we will be using an event, and this event is in the player service, and it's called the CharacterAdded event. And the CharacterAdded event, events will have a lightning bolt symbol, and the CharacterAdded event will fire whenever a player enters your experience. And we're going to connect that to a function, and we're going to put in the first parameter as the player. You don't have to specify the type in the function because the first parameter, it will always be the player type, so you can name the variable or argument whatever you want. I just like to do that so I understand it later on, and it's for my own safety's sake. So the first thing we want to do here is we want to create the Leaderstats folder. So we're going to define an inner variable Leaderstats local Leaderstats equals instance.new. We're going to create a new instance. We're going to create a new folder instance, and then we're going to name the folder. So Leaderstats.name equals Leaderstats. This is case sensitive. It has to all be lowercase or this will not work. And we need to parent the folder to the player. Basically, we are creating a new folder, we're naming it Leaderstats, and we are putting the folder, newly created folder, inside of the player. And if I were to go back to the game and I were to press play right now, you can see that nothing happens because I did not add a value to the Leaderstats. I only just created the Leaderstats, as you can see here. So to add a value to the Leaderstats, in this tutorial, in this example, we're going to count the deaths of the player when the player gets killed or resets, it's going to add up or decline the deaths. So we're going to need a integer value, also known as an int value. So we're going to create that also by doing local death as a variable death. We're going to put the value as instance.new int value, and we're going to set the integer's value's name to death or deaths, however you want. It doesn't have to be case sensitive. We will set the value, since it's an integer value, it has a number value basically, so the default value is 0, and we're going to parent the int value to the Leaderstats folder. So to recap, we are connecting the player added event to a function. When the player gets added, it'll connect and run this function. It'll create the Leaderstats folder. It'll parent the Leaderstats folder to the player. It'll create an integer value called death. The default value is 0, and its parent will be in the Leaderstats. It'll be in the Leaderstats folder. So if we go back and we press play, you can see that the Leaderstats now shows, and we have our death value. You can see over here, we have our death value. Now to add a value to the Leaderstats folder, for this example, like I just stated earlier, we're going to add one value to the int value whenever a player resets their character or dies. In order to do that, we are going to use an event for the player called the CharacterAdded event. And the CharacterAdded will fire whenever a player's character is added into the workspace. I'll show you what that means in just a second. And we're going to connect this to the function, and the first parameter is going to be the character model. And with every character model, there's going to be different limbs inside of it, and there's going to be arms, legs, heads, but there's also something called a humanoid, which is essentially like the brain and the heart of the player, that tells, you know, everybody else that it's a human. You can set its health, you can take its health, you can set its name distance, you can get its state, is it jumping, is it sitting, all these other things. So to get that, we're going to create the humanoid variable, and we're going to get its value from the character model. So we're going to do character find first child of class humanoid, and there's different ways that you can do this as well. You can do find first child of class, you can do just find first child and then type in humanoid, or you can do find first child, which is a humanoid. All of these three methods work as well, but I'm just going to stick with find first child of class. So now that we have the humanoid, defined in a variable, the first thing we will do is we're going to get the humanoid, and we're going to use another event called the died event. This will run whenever the humanoid is killed and it is dead, and there is no default parameter to it. And to add on the Leaderstats, we will simply just say Leaderstats.death. This has to be the name of the value, so it has to be the name of the integer value. Dot value equals Leaderstats.death.value plus 1. So to quickly recap, we are creating a character added event. When a character is added to the workspace, it'll connect and run this function. It'll use the humanoid variable. It'll find the first child of class inside of the character model. That's a humanoid. Whenever that humanoid is dead or it dies, it'll fire this event and it'll run this function, and this function will go to the Leaderstats. It'll find the deaths and its value, and it'll add 1 to it. So Leaderstats.death.value, let's say it's 0. Let's say stats is 0, and we are equaling that to 0 plus 1, so that would ultimately be 1. So let's try it out, and let's press play. And you can see that we have 0 deaths currently, and if I were to reset my character, you can see that the death is added to 1. If I reset again, you can see the death is added again. So now what we're going to do is we're going to use the second method, and we are going to disable the first Leaderstats script, and I'm going to add another service script inside of service script service in the players folder. I'm going to name this Leaderstats 2. Again, I'm just going to change the run context, and I can simply just copy and paste this function, this whole line of code here, this whole script, and then we're going to change a few things. So first we're going to remove the creation of Leaderstats, and we are also going to create another variable under the player service called server storage, and then we're going to create a empty variable at the moment called just Leaderstats. And now we're going to head over to server storage, and we are going to click on it and click on the folder. We're going to add a folder. We're going to name this folder Leaderstats, all in lowercase, and we're going to add an integer value, and we are going to name this death, and we're going to make sure the value is 0, and then we're going back to the Leaderstats 2 script, and we're going to do local Leaderstats. I'm going to add a value to it, so equals server storage dot Leaderstats, and all we have to do to add the Leaderstats to the player is we're going to clone the Leaderstats folder from the server storage. So basically what we're doing here is we're creating the Leaderstats folder in server storage, because as you can see in the first script, we create a new folder. We've named it Leaderstats, exactly how it is, but the parent of it is player, and currently the parent of it is server storage, but we're going to clone it and set its parent to the player ourselves. And we can also see we've set the death integer value the value of 0, and the name death, and the parent is Leaderstats, and the parent of the death integer value is in Leaderstats. So all we have to do is we can clone this Leaderstats folder and parent it to the player, and everything should work as recreated with the first script. So there's 3 ways you can do this. There's the first way, which is the simplest way, where you can do Leaderstats and then use the clone function, and we can set its parent to the player. Or we can have something that is similar to creating the Leaderstats folder by having a variable called cloned Leaderstats equals Leaderstats clone, and then cloned Leaderstats dot parent equals player. This also works. Or you can also go into the Leaderstats variable and just add clone, and all we have to do is just do Leaderstats dot parent equals player. And the function here should work perfectly the same. So let's try it out, and let's press play. And as you can see, we have our death value copied from server storage, exactly as the same folder with the same value. And let us reset. And as you can see, our death is counting up by 1. So I've told you how you can create a Leaderstats folder and how you can clone it from server storage as another method, and it works the same way. And we've added the value. Now let's try to remove the value. So with that, I'm going to create a part. I'm going to anchor this part, and I'm going to name the part RemoveDeath. I'm going to color the part, let's say this color, and I am going to add a script into this part, and I'm going to set its run context, and I'm going to get the player service. And here we are going to remove the death whenever a player touches this part. So we're going to type in script.parent. The script's parent is the remove death part, and we're going to use the touched event, which means whenever something touches this part, this touched event will fire. We're going to connect this to a function, and we're going to add its first parameter, which is a base part. And a base part can be whatever is inside of a character or whatever that's an object. So it can be the character's arms, the character's legs, whatever that touches the part. And with this, we're going to get the player itself. So we're going to type in the variable player, and we're going to add its value as players. Get player from character other part dot parent. And like I just said a second ago, other part can be the arm, the legs of a player. The parent of the part of the base part is going to be the character model, hence why we're getting the player from the character. And with this, we're going to do an if statement. So if this, then that. So we're going to do if player, if it's a player, and player is not equal to nil, which means the player is existing and it is a player, then player dot leaderstats dot death dot value equals player dot leaderstats dot death dot value minus 1. Let's press play. And we can see we currently have 0 deaths. If I reset my character, you can see that we have 1 death. And also, that I forgot to mention, when our character is added, we can go into workspace and you can see that it has my username as a class of a model. You can see when I click it, it highlights my entire character, meaning this is my character model. And if I expand this and open this up, you can see that we have all my accessories. We have the humanoid. We have our left hand, right hand, our body parts. So, with this in mind, let's walk to the part, and we can see that we have 1 death, and we walk on it, and it removes the death. However, you may see that now our death is in a negative, and if I keep touching this part, it'll keep going further back, further down the negative route. And you might be wondering, okay, why is it doing that? Well, it's because the touched event fires whenever something touches it. So because my character is currently touching it, and if there's an animation and it moves and I'm just touching it slightly or moving around, it'll fire the touch event over and over and over again. So it'll continuously remove the death by 1. So to combat that, let's add something called a debounce or a cooldown. So in order to do that, we will go back to our RemoveDeath script in the part, and we're going to add a variable at the very top below the player service, local cooldown. Going to set this to false. This is a boolean value, meaning it's a true or false, yes or no. The default value is going to be false, meaning there's no cooldown. We're going to the if statement check, and we're going to add another value called cooldown. We're going to check if it's false, meaning there's no cooldown. Then it'll remove the death by 1. However, we may come to another issue where it's always going to be on false, it's always going to not have a cooldown, and it's just going to loop through the same thing again. So all we have to do is we can just set the cooldown to true, meaning there is a cooldown. And now here comes another issue. If we touch it once, it'll remove 1 death, but the cooldown will stay there forever, and we may not want that. So to combat that, all we have to do is just do task.wait. We're going to wait, let's say 1 second, and all we have to do is just set the cooldown back to false. So to recap that, is we created a variable called cooldown, and we've had it as a boolean, and we've made it false, meaning there's no cooldown. We've added in the if statement check, so if there's a player and the player is not equals to nil, and the player does not have a cooldown, then it'll remove the death value by 1, and it'll set the cooldown, meaning it is on cooldown. It'll wait 1 second, and it'll set the cooldown back down to false. Now, some of you may be thinking, what's the difference between task.wait and just simple wait? And from my understanding, is task.wait is the rough estimate, and wait is the exact whole number or the server time. So there isn't really much difference between a couple milliseconds, but task.wait, I believe, is the more preferred way that people use it nowadays. So we can test this out real quick, and we can press play. You can see we have 0 deaths. If I reset, see our death adds by 1, and then we can now see if I touch this, it removes a death, and if I touch it again, it'll remove another death. Touch it again, it will remove another death, but it's waiting every second, so it doesn't go more than 1 per second. And this should be it. However, I'm sure some people want to know how to make it so it's not in the negative. And to do that, we will use another if statement check. So we're just going to use if statements and just check to see if it's this or not. It's kind of simple. So we have the cooldown thing set, and all we have to do is check if player.leaderstats.death.value is equal to 0, then we return. What that means is if the player's death value equals 0, meaning they're on 0 deaths, we will return, meaning we'll do nothing. We'll just return back and send nothing back to the check of the value. And this means if your death is at 0, it'll do absolutely nothing, and that is it. But this line of code right here might still remove it. So all we have to do is just do else if player.leaderstats.death.value is more than 0, then we will run this function. So just a recap, we are checking if the player's leader stats value is 0. If it is, it'll return and do nothing. Else, if the player's leader stats value, death value, is more than 0, it'll remove the value by 1. The cooldown is still there. So if, let's say I reset my character, and my character is at 1, and I reset it again, we are at 2 deaths currently. Let's run to the part. You can see we have 1 death left, and after 1 second it removed it, and we are now at 0, and you can see that it's not going below 0 because we said if it's at 0, it'll return and do nothing. I hope this video is helpful for you guys, and I hope you guys understand and get a grasp of how you can create and use leader stats, and how you can add and remove values and check for certain things, and how to use cooldowns or debounces, and just generally create something that a lot of experiences use to their advantage. And you can even have this and disable the player list, and it'll still work as normal. But that being said, I hope you guys enjoy this video, and I hope this video teaches you something. And I'm still learning Lua and Luau, so I may not be 100% with everything, but if this video helps you, if you leave a like, it would help me greatly, and I'll make more content like this soon. And if I said something wrong or explained something improperly, I do apologize. Other than that, hope you guys have a nice day, and I'll leave a link to this game file in the description below, and all the things we talked about in this video in the description below, so you can read furthermore, and you can copy the code and experiment in the place file as well. And with that being said, I hope you guys have a very nice day, and I'll see you guys later. Peace.